Chapter 91. The Ancient Temple. You cannot leave. Another voice spread throughout the air behind Lin Feng and Protector Bay. The pythonfish was spitting in and out a thick smoke. It suddenly opened its gigantic mouth and took a deep whistling breath which resonated in the atmosphere while releasing a strong qi. At the same time, a legendary rock spread its gigantic wings and flew towards Lin Feng and Protector Bay. The strong qi and the air currents in the atmosphere slowed Lin Feng and Protector Bay's escape. Lin Feng had the impression that his body was going to be swallowed by the beasts chasing him. If Protector Bay wasn't firmly controlling the situation, Lin Feng would have already been eaten by the pythonfish. The legendary rock was a Zan-level beast. It was extremely powerful. Only cultivators of the Zan Qi layer could control them. A single breath could release an incredible amount of energy, and Lin Feng, at that moment, would be unable to withstand even half of a breath. Suppress them. Teng Wuhan was on the body of the legendary rock and was shouting. He took out some pitch-black chains and threw himself at Lin Feng while attempting a surprise attack. Get lost. A loud shout was heard. The pitch-black chains had been intercepted by someone, and that person was the old woman. Go. I will kill this evil animal. The old woman's voice was calm, but Protector Bay solemnly nodded. There were only two people who were strong enough to catch up with him. One of them was the old man carrying a huge sword, and the other was Teng Wuhan, who was riding the legendary rock. These two people had both attempted to intercept him with their attacks. The old man had been injured by Protector Kong, so if they managed to kill the legendary rock, nobody would be able to catch up with Lin Feng. Concerning what the old woman had said, Protector Bay had doubts and suspected she wouldn't have the power to kill the rock. I still remember our agreement. Please remember to tell Lu Kanglan, that little bastard, that I forgive him. As far as Wen Renyan and Lu Fei's wedding is concerned, let's forget about it. Lin Feng is suitable for this position. The old woman said calmly. Protector Bay laughed but didn't reply. You are not allowed to brag until you have actually killed my legendary rock. Teng Wuhan said that while smiling coldly. He then made the pitch-black chains shake so much that the old woman almost lost balance. As she looked like she was about to fall, the legendary rock was ready to swallow her whole. Zan-level beasts were extremely intelligent, thus when the old woman said that she wanted to kill it, she had earned the hatred from the beast. An animal is animal. The old woman shouted extremely loudly in a cold tone. Her long hair was floating in the air. Then, a viper shadow appeared behind her back. It then seemed like her entire body had transformed into a snake. Immediately after, she threw herself straight towards the open mouth of the legendary rock. That's right. She didn't resist, and instead she hurled herself straight into the mouth of the legendary rock. At that moment, she was inside its body. When Lin Feng saw that, he was extremely moved. Let's go. Protector Bay said indifferently. They looked behind them one last time and flew away at the speed of light. They only heard a tremendous roar fill the air from a distance away as they continued to move into the horizon. Lin Feng had already guessed what had happened to the legendary rock. As far as the tensions between Lin Feng and Wen Renyan were concerned, Lin Feng didn't hate the old woman at all for having saved Wen Renyan. He could understand her and why she had saved her only student. The old woman didn't care about losing face to save her only disciple's life. In the Yunhai sect, she was a protector. She was also ready to sacrifice her life for the sect. That old woman was really ugly and had terrible judge of character, but was definitely worthy of respect. At that moment, nobody was able to catch up with Protector Bay. The wings of his crane spirit were flashing through the air at the speed of light, and in the blink of an eye, they had disappeared from the stormy gorge without a trace. Protector Bay and Lin Feng finally escaped from the Yunhai sect alive, but they didn't have any happy emotions from surviving the catastrophe. They knew that their lives had been saved because of all the blood that was flowing down the stormy gorge. At the precipice of the abyss, there were only cliffs and precipices, nothing else. Apart from the passageway leading to these precipices, the only other possibility to access or leave the place was by flying there. At that moment, the silhouette of a crane was flying towards the precipice of abyss and was about to land by the square room filled with drums. Lin Feng recognized this place. He was surprised. Actually, he even had doubts. Protector Bay hadn't brought him far away from the Yunhai sect, rather he had brought him to the precipice of abyss. We're going down. Protector Bay looked at the precipice of abyss, and immediately after they landed there, they were surrounded by a dense fog. Do you remember this place? Asked Protector Bay to Lin Feng. Lin Feng didn't really understand why the Protector Bay was asking him that, but he nodded and said, I remember this very well. Yes, Walking from passageway to passageway and precipice to precipice, you just end up here. While talking, Protector Bay tapped a stone 3 times and suddenly a stone wall started moving and a door appeared. These cliffs and precipices really constituted another world but also offered a scenery of exceptional charm. Let's go inside, said Protector Bay while bringing Lin Feng in. Then, the door closed itself, making a loud slamming noise. The place that they entered looked like a temple. It looked like an extremely temple within a palace. It was filled with an antique type of qi. In the middle of that temple, there was a painting of a dragon and a phoenix. There were a multitude of pillars as well which were supporting the walls of the ancient temple. On these pillars, there were a myriad of carvings representing different ferocious beasts. Surprisingly, Lin Feng had never seen many of these ferocious beasts. He was shocked that he did not know of the beasts on the carvings. The Yunhai sect didn't build and established itself here for its physical features. It actually established itself here because they had discovered this temple. Protector Bay's voice was resonating in the temple and he then continued to introduce the place to Lin Feng. Extremely strong cultivators in the past must have regularly come here in the ancient times to practice cultivation. Of course, this place may have also been an ancient sect. Some of the most powerful and mysterious skills and techniques that you can find in the Xing Chen Pavilion were actually brought from here. Before we found these skills and techniques, the Xing Chen Pavilion didn't have that many extremely powerful skills. But because news spreads quickly and there are many people with bad intentions, this place is kept secret from everyone within the sect. Only protectors of the Yunhai sect know about this place. Even the patriarch does not know that this temple exists. Extremely strong cultivators of the ancient times came to practice here? Even the patriarch didn't know that place? Lin Feng was touched by the fact he had been told this secret. Surprisingly, only protectors of the sect were allowed to come here. Lin Feng was observing the temple with all of his attention. It was imposing, gigantic, and the qi flowing in the air was extremely powerful. The temple was filled with all sorts of treasures, skills, techniques and weapons. Even though they were covered in dust, they were all very old and probably extremely powerful. Lin Feng, come with me. Protector Bay started walking and brought Lin Feng into the depths of the temple. A short instant later, they found themselves in front of the entrance of a small room. In the middle of that room, there was a brown wood carving. There was also a bookshelf in which there were many books. Even though they were covered with dust, they were perfectly arranged and sorted, which meant that someone had tidied this place recently. We're going to take all of the skills and techniques of the Xing Chen Pavilion. They are all handwritten copies. The lowest skills and techniques are of the Zan level. The highest skills and techniques are of low-quality D-level ones. There is an incredible number of books, but they are extremely hard to learn and many cannot be practiced. Even the protectors found them difficult to learn. Practicing them even a little bit already enables us to carry out extremely powerful attacks. You can choose an appropriate skill for yourself to learn. If Lin Feng had come to this place before, he would certainly have been overjoyed, but at that moment, he couldn't express the slightest sign of happiness. All the events that had occurred were uninterruptedly appearing in his mind. He couldn't get rid of these horrible images. Let's go and check another room. Protector Bay wasn't done showing things to Lin Feng. He then brought him to another antique room. Weapons. The floor made of stone was diffusing an extremely old yet strong qi which made Lin Feng feel shivers. These weapons all had spirits. These weapons had spirits, they were spiritual weapons. You can call them weapons, but it would be more precise to call them spiritual weapons. Protector Bay continued his explanations while sounding solemn. Weapon is a word used to describe ordinary weapons, but these weapons here have spirits. They are extremely powerful and unique. Protector Bay walked towards an ancient sword and grabbed it. He then said to Lin Feng, "Give me the sword that you're carrying on your back." Lin Feng slightly nodded and handed his long sword to Protector Bay. Protector Bay didn't use any skill or technique, but Lin Feng's long sword flew into the air towards Protector Bay and collided into the other sword. An incredibly clear and melodious sound resonated in the room. A sword then moved straight into Lin Feng's hand. That sword was extremely sharp and looked beautiful and shiny. All of these weapons are not ordinary weapons. They are all spiritual weapons. An ignorant man can quickly become a criminal, but treasuring a jade ring is also a crime. We have never let the weapons see the real world, but from today, all of them will belong to you. Belong to me? Lin Feng was astonished. Protector Bay was still there alive, but he was giving everything to Lin Feng? Indeed, everything that is here now belongs to you, stated Protector Bay solemnly while nodding. He then took a stone which was laying amongst all the weapons. It looked ordinary. This is an ancient Na stone. It is empty inside. If you put a drop of blood on the top, the space which is inside that stone will open itself for you. Protector Bei explained the things to Lin Feng while handing the stone over to him. Lin Feng used his sword to cut the tip of his finger. He then let a drop of blood fall onto the stone. His blood was slowly flowing on the stone, and then something strange happened. The Na stone diffused a bright and dazzling light. Lin Feng's blood became extremely red and slowly started spreading through the stone. At that moment, a wonderful sensation and emotion welled up in Lin Feng's heart. It was as if Lin Feng and that stone had created an indescribable and unbreakable connection. Lin Feng had the feeling that his entire consciousness had connected with the stone. Inside of that stone, there was an incredibly huge space which was full of items. A strangely familiar smell invaded Lin Feng's nostrils, which suddenly made him shiver. Is it? Lin Feng's pupils were dilated and staring at Protector Bei. You were right. This is Nan Gong Ling's qi. When he was still alive, everything that belonged to him, everything that belonged to the sect was stored in that stone. Now, you are the owner of that stone, declared Protector Bei solemnly. Then, he fixedly stared at Lin Feng and said, Lin Feng, from today, you are the new patriarch of the Yun Hai sect. End of chapter 91. Chapter 92. Deadly Cross-Shadow. Lin Feng, from today, you are the new patriarch of the Yun Hai sect. Protector Bei was speaking in a solemn and quiet tone. Lin Feng was trembling from head to toe while staring blankly at Protector Bei. Lin Feng, even though the Yun Hai sect probably has nobody left, I don't want it to let it disappear forever. That was Nan Gong Ling's wish as well. In the future, if you have the chance, then I hope that you can rebuild it and revive the Yun Hai sect. While looking at the myriad of wrinkles present on the old man's face, Lin Feng nodded solemnly and respectfully. If I, Lin Feng, don't die, I will definitely revive the Yun Hai sect. Alright, Protector Bei smiled and tapped on Lin Feng's shoulder with his right hand. Lin Feng, there is something else I have to tell you. Protector Bei, please tell me. In the past, Fei Fei's father, Lu Kanglan and Nan Gong Ling were the most outstanding disciples of the Yun Hai sect, which gave endless hope to everybody within the sect. Before Nan Gong Ling became the patriarch of the Yun Hai sect, there was Nan Gong Ling's teacher and former patriarch. Actually, he would have preferred to make Lu Kanglan become the patriarch. He also wanted to give him his only daughter for marriage. But after that, Lu Kanglan decided to leave the sect, abandoning everything behind him. He wanted to let Nan Gong Ling become the patriarch, but what Lu Kanglan didn't know is that the patriarch's daughter had already fallen in love with him. Because she had been abandoned by Lu Kanglan, she was feeling so desperate that she committed suicide. Because of the death of his daughter, the patriarch at the time suffered so much. One day he left the Yun Hai sect and never came back. Nobody knows whether he was dead or alive. Since that moment, Nan Gong Ling became the patriarch of the sect. Besides, Lu Kanglan had completely lost face, so he couldn't come back to the Yun Hai sect. As an apology, he made Fei Fei join the Yun Hai sect. He wanted to apologize to the former patriarch and to his daughter, even more to the former patriarch's wife. Her beloved daughter had passed away and her husband had disappeared without leaving trace. Therefore, the old woman had a deep and bitter hatred for Lu Kanglan. She became Wen Renyan's teacher and dreamed of seeing her student getting married with Lu Kanglan's daughter, Fei Fei. That is why Wen Renyan had dared to act such a way in the Yun Hai sect. When Lin Feng heard all of these things, his heart was pounding. He was astonished. He wouldn't have thought that the Yun Hai sect had such secrets. No wonder Wen Renyan was so arrogant and dared say that Lu Fei was his. No wonder that the old woman had seemed so eccentric. That explained everything. Lin Feng, did you hear the old woman when she told me to tell Lu Kanglan that she forgave him? She also said that she had no objections to you getting married with Fei Fei. However, this is your private life and I'll let you arrange the things yourself. Protector Bei was speaking honestly, pouring out the content that was locked away in his heart, and then continued. Lu Kanglan should be in Duan Ren City now. You can go and look for him. He is an honest man. He is afraid of fighting with Duan Tian Lang though. If something happened to Lu Kanglan, please take good care of Lu Fei. Protector Bei, there is nothing happening between Lu Fei and me, said Lin Feng while smiling wryly. The old woman had only said that Lin Feng was better suited for Lu Fei than Wen Renyan. Did that mean that he had to marry Lu Fei? What the old woman said was a suggestion. You have to go tell Lu Kanglan that Lu Fei is still in the Yun Hai sect. Duan Tian Lang, considering Lu Fei's status, would never dare kill her, but if Lu Kanglan fell from power or died, things would be different. Therefore, you must take good care of Lu Fei. Besides, Lu Fei is also an outstanding young woman. You two are a perfect match. Alright, we have talked enough for now. The temple is yours. Dispose of it as you wish. Don't forget to go and find Lu Kanglan. Protector Bei. Lin Feng's voice was firm. Protector Bei's tone of speech made Lin Feng have an ominous premonition. On that side, there is an exit, it leads to the Black Wind Mountain. Please be careful. Of course, you can also practice in the temple. You can wait to become a little bit stronger and then go out, said Protector Bei while scratching his ear. When he finished talking, he turned around and headed to the exit. Protector Bei, you. Lin Feng's facial expression drastically changed. He ran after Protector Bei and wanted to shout and ask him to stay. Lin Feng, I am a protector of the Yun Hai sect. While the Yun Hai sect still exists, then I can live. However, if it were to be destroyed, then how can I continue living without protecting it? When he finished talking, Protector Bei was already leaving. The large stone door opened, making a rumbling noise. Protector Bei didn't turn around and left Lin Feng alone within the temple. Lin Feng stared at Protector Bei's back as he left. Lin Feng had the feeling that lightning was surging in his heart. He was standing there while gazing blankly into the distance. While the stone door was closing itself, Protector Bei's silhouette was gradually vanishing. This would probably be the last time he saw Protector Bei. Lin Feng understood clearly that this temple didn't only separate him from the rest of the world, it was a spiritual separation like the yin and the yang. It was the key to eternal life. Lin Feng stood there alone at the same place for a long time while staring blankly into the distance, and then finally started moving again. He closed his eyes and took a deep sorrowful breath which resonated throughout the temple. Patriarch, Protector Bei, Protector Kong, old woman, these noble elders, they sacrificed themselves to save my life. They fearlessly handed themselves over to those despicable people to protect me. They are not here anymore, but I am still here, and I have so many things to do. Lin Feng was talking to himself. His sad expression had turned into a determined expression full of willpower. It required an extraordinary strength to change destiny. Lin Feng wanted to make these people who had given their lives for him a chance to find peace in death. He would make them proud, and they would not die in vain. Hao Yu Sect, Ice and Snow Mountain Village, Mo Shou Sect, Duan Clan, Han Shui Tian, Teng Wu Shan, Duan Tian Lang, Duan Han, Mo Keng Lan, Wen Ren Yan. All these names, all these treacherous people. They were deeply engraved in Lin Feng's memories. He would never forget about them. He would one day get revenge for the events which had happened today. Lin Feng turned around and walked towards the first room he had visited. In that room, there was a huge bookshelf full of agility techniques and martial skills. It was divided into sections. One section was dedicated to agility techniques and one section was dedicated to martial skills. Blade Cadence, low D-level agility technique, produces pure and sharp energy to propel oneself. Lin Feng looked at an agility technique, but it didn't suit him at all. The best was to possess a blade spirit when using that agility technique. Of course, Lin Feng was too weak at the moment to use the energy required. He couldn't learn and practice such agility techniques. After getting stronger and after breaking through to the Zan Qi layer, he would be able to control pure energy, which was extremely powerful. Lin Feng put the book back into the bookshelf and checked 2 martial skill books. Swift Leaves skill of the low D level. Leaves emerge out of the palm of the user. These leaves are faintly discernible and extremely quick. It seems like they have no power, but they can actually penetrate directly into the opponent's body, causing internal damage. These leaves are extremely powerful and can go almost unnoticed. That looked like a skill suited to a female cultivator. It didn't look that strong, but if the opponent underestimated that skill, they would probably die in horrible conditions. A female could easily get close and kill her opponent without anyone seeing an attack. Besides, that attack was faintly discernible, which made it almost impossible for opponents to block it. Lin Feng put it down and looked at another skill. Deadly Cross Shadow low D level skill. Suitable for people whose spirits enable them to become invisible. It is divided into 3 movements: Vanishing Shadow, Dark Shadow and Deadly Cross Shadow. This is similar to Protector Kong's skill, thought Lin Feng. His heart bounced for a second. It seemed like Protector Kong had only learnt the first part of the skill and had combined it with other skills. Besides, it was a perfect skill for his shadow spirit. It was extremely strong. Too bad that Protector Kong hadn't been able to practice until Dark Shadow Pierce, otherwise, he could have been really invisible. As far as the last part of the skill was concerned, Deadly Cross Shadow, it was indeed extremely powerful, making you almost undetectable by the enemy. My celestial spirit enables me to release a special cloaking chi, and the illusionary demon makes my opponents suffer of hallucinations. Combined with my spirit, that Deadly Cross Shadow should be perfect. Lin Feng's heart was racing. That skill had no strength requirement. A cultivator of any chi layer could learn and practice it as long as they could understand the complexity of the skill. That skill was only a tool though, a way to complement one's other skills. Bringing Deadly Cross Shadow into play could strongly enhance a person's other abilities. Lin Feng then continued looking at other skills. He didn't find any other skill which was appropriate for him. He then put all the skills on the bookshelf into the Na stone. Apart from Lin Feng, the protectors hadn't told anybody else about that place. These things should be safe in the bookshelf, but if Lin Feng had a problem, it was probably better to have them near him, especially in case of emergency. Lin Feng then went to the other room where there were the spiritual weapons. He also began putting them inside the Na stone. There were a lot of purity stones in the temple. Lin Feng also put them all in the Na stone. Purity stones contained pure chi like that of heaven and earth. Any cultivator who had at least broken through to the Ling chi layer could use these to enhance their cultivation. It was a very valuable item. How could Lin Feng not take these precious items with him? Lin Feng walked around in that vast temple. He made a few rounds and noticed that on the pillars situated at both ends of the temple, the ferocious beasts engraved into the stone were exactly the same. Only by looking at the drawings of the ferocious beasts, Lin Feng could feel an extremely strong and powerful chi. It was much stronger than that Zan-level pythonfish. But Lin Feng was more concerned with something else. There was a greenish door made from carved jade which was emanating a strong chi. Lin Feng tried to push it in vain. No matter what strength he put into it, it wouldn't move. Furthermore, there also seemed to be no hidden lever or switch to open the door. What is the secret of that door? Maybe the one who built this temple has left hints behind. Too bad that I can't open it. Lin Feng frowned. Protector Bei hadn't opened the door for him. Maybe none of the protectors of the Yunhai sect had ever opened this door before. Never mind. If I have the opportunity and I am strong enough, I will come back and try again. Lin Feng said these few words while finally giving up. In the history of the Yunhai sect, which dated back to 1,000 years, nobody had ever opened that jade door. It was obviously very hard to open, and it would be a waste of time to stay there for too long trying to open it. These days, the most important thing was to become stronger. Strong enough to protect himself and strong enough to protect those who were close to him. Lin Feng had broken through to the second Ling Chi layer, which was extremely rare for his age, but if he had to face cultivators who had cultivated for a few years longer, then he would be in a critical situation, no matter their talent. He needed to become strong. End of Chapter 92. Chapter 93. Girl Inside the Illusion. There was a bed made of stone which was appropriate for the practicing of cultivation techniques. Lin Feng sat cross-legged on that bed and entered into a state of meditation. He was absorbing pure chi from the purity stone. However, he quickly opened his eyes with a perplexed look. On the path of cultivation, sitting and meditating wasn't enough to advance to the next chi layer. Knowledge was also necessary, as well as enlightenment on the path of cultivation. Lin Feng had the feeling that he had absorbed enough pure chi in order to break through to the third Ling Chi layer. It was enough chi at that moment to condense into the next layer, but he had yet to break through. He would break through to the next Ling Chi layer at the right moment. When the water comes, a channel is formed. It feels like a week has passed since I entered the temple. Lin Feng tried to estimate the time he had spent in the temple. He then immediately stood up and walked towards the exit. Considering Lin Feng's strength, it was impossible for him to leave the same way he had arrived. He could not fly. He had no choice but to walk through the long and narrow passageway towards Black Wind Mountain. Lin Feng was convinced that this passageway had been constructed by the previous generations of the Yunhai sect. It was impossible for the ancient cultivators who owned the temple to spend so much time digging in the rock to create such a long passageway to go to the Black Wind Mountain. Why would they need to do something so hidden? The ancestors of the Yunhai sect had created that place for the members of the sect to take refuge. They would have never thought that the Yunhai sect would never get the chance to escape from an attack and that they would be slaughtered, leaving behind a river of blood. Lin Feng had walked for a while when he arrived at the end of the passageway. At that point, the passage was so narrow that he had to crouch down to exit. It was really extremely dark, and Lin Feng observed the sky for the first time in over a week. It was night and the full moon was brightly lighting the sky. The air was chilly, and Lin Feng could sense the cold in his lungs and throat. This place was the summit of a chain of mountains. Surprisingly, this is where the passageway leads to. It's a very safe route, thought Lin Feng, filled with admiration for those who had created the passageway. This place was a part of the Black Wind Mountain, and it seemed like no humans had ever been there. This place was mainly occupied by ferocious beasts. Ferocious beasts in that part of the Black Wind Mountain were much larger than average, so even if they found the entrance of the passageway, they'd never be able to gain access because the passageway was very small and narrow. Apart from ferocious beasts, even if human beings found the entrance of the passageway, who would be willing to crawl through the dark passageway for such a long time without knowing where it led? A small rock which was hanging above of the entrance of the passageway fell down and rolled across the floor. Lin Feng sat on that rock and stared at the full moon. His eyes revealed disappointment. Lin Feng felt extremely lonely. Back in the days, he had been riding his horse from Yangzhou City towards the Yunhai sect, crossing a wide range of landscapes including lakes and rivers. Back then, he would have never thought that the Yunhai sect would give birth to lakes and rivers of blood. Lin Feng was thinking about that bloodbath and replaying the massacre over and over in his head. He had no choice but to hope for a better future. It was a cold and windy evening. Lin Feng's robes were flowing in the wind, but Lin Feng remained motionless like a statue. At that moment, the qi of heaven and earth had started fluctuating in a strange way. It suddenly started rushing towards Lin Feng as if it was going to pierce into his bones and flesh. It was both marvelous and intriguing at the same time. Lin Feng wasn't really paying any attention to the events happening before him. He just kept looking at the moon with a look of sorrow on his face. At that moment, Lin Feng wanted to forget everything. He had really lost too much. Lin Feng had just been sitting on that rock for a little while and something incredibly strange happened. Lin Feng was astonished. A milky pure energy was floating around his hands. It was more condensed than what Lin Feng had ever experienced before. I broke through to the third Ling Qi layer? Lin Feng was dumbfounded. He wouldn't have thought that sitting on that rock for a little while would make him break through to the next Ling Qi layer. He attributed the event to his previous meditation, but mostly to his own luck. Third Ling Qi layer, that coupled with all the cards I now hold, if I meet Duan Han now, I should definitely be able to defeat him. When Lin Feng remembered Han Man, his eyes formed into an icy glare. Duan Han and his father all had to die for having exterminated the Yunhai sect. They had exterminated his closest friends. "Who dares?" shouted Lin Feng extremely loudly. He turned around and his pupils shrank. At that moment, a silhouette appeared in front of him, but Lin Feng had the impression it was a hallucination. It was an extremely beautiful silhouette. The moon was shining upon that exquisite silhouette, allowing Lin Feng to clearly see some of her physical features. What a beauty! Lin Feng had the impression that he was dreaming. She was wearing thin white robes. Anyone who saw her would feel like protecting and hugging her, but would certainly not feel enchanted. Such perfection. Lin Feng was stupefied. Even if he felt determined and had a lot of willpower, when seeing this young girl, he could only be amazed at the beauty of the women in this world. They all looked so beautiful and delicate, much more than in the previous world. Many of them even looked like goddesses. Lu Fei was extremely beautiful, and she was incredibly strong. Lin Feng had realized that beauties of this world were on another level. The girl who was in standing front of Lin Feng looked like an illusion. She actually looked like a painting. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" The incredibly beautiful girl opened her mouth and her voice sounded out, breaking the illusion. She wasn't an illusion, but she was so beautiful that she didn't look real. "My name is Lin Feng. How did you find your way to this place?" Lin Feng was too perplexed and intrigued when looking at this young girl. It was at night in a lost corner of the Black Wind Mountain, and suddenly a beautiful girl had appeared from out of nowhere. Lin Feng was utterly confused at how this had happened. Lin Feng moved towards the girl to see her better, and as expected, that girl didn't look weak. She even looked remarkably strong. "Lin Feng," the girl whispered Lin Feng's name again for herself and then immediately said, "I've always lived here." Suddenly, "You come here and ask me what I am doing here? I also don't know how I found this place." Lin Feng shrugged and replied, but it was unlikely that she would believe him. "Since it's like that, please leave," said the girl, giving a cold stare. "But I don't know where I am or how to leave," said Lin Feng, smiling wryly. He only knew where the entrance of the passageway was, but he didn't know where he was at that moment and where to go from there. He didn't know where he was exactly. "Are we in the Black Wind Mountain?" asked Lin Feng. The girl stared at Lin Feng. He surprisingly didn't even whether it was the Black Wind Mountain or not. Indeed, this is the hinterland of the Black Wind Mountain. Lin Feng was stupefied. This was the hinterland of the Black Wind Mountain? Protector Bay probably never walked here before. Lin Feng was smiling wryly. On the outskirts of the Black Wind Mountain, there were strong ferocious beasts, but inside the Black Wind Mountain, there were even more powerful ferocious beasts, and they were constantly running wild. If Lin Feng wanted to get out of here, then it wasn't going to be easy. If Protector Bay had known this before, then he probably would have never left Lin Feng alone in the temple and would have never shown him the passageway. You just said that you've always been living here? Lin Feng just realized what the girl had said. He was stupefied. There were people living in the Black Wind Mountain? Indeed. I've been living here with my mother since I was a child. The girl was nodding her head confidently. Have you never been out of here? Asked Lin Feng. Never. Lin Feng didn't know what to say, but he was thinking that it was better for such a beautiful and delicate woman to never venture outside. She was so beautiful that she would cause great trouble wherever she went. She looked lovely enough that she might just cause the downfall of the country. Maybe her mother is as beautiful as her, and this is why they enjoyed living in seclusion, thought Lin Feng. He then asked her, are there no ferocious beasts in the area? No, there aren't any, said the girl, shaking her delicate head. Lin Feng slightly nodded. No wonder that she could live here all of her life. If there were no ferocious beasts in that area, it wouldn't be very dangerous. Do you want to leave here? The girl suddenly asked Lin Feng while staring at him. Her eyes were sparkling. Of course, I want to leave tomorrow morning, said Lin Feng. I'll help you leave here, and I'll come with you. The girl opened her mouth again, but this time Lin Feng had a weird feeling. She would bring Lin Feng out of this place on her own? In the Black Wind Mountain there were many dangerous ferocious beasts. That girl didn't seem to be a weak cultivator, but she also seemed to be about as young as Lin Feng, which meant she couldn't be that strong. How could she walk through the Black Wind Mountain so easily? Lin Feng's spirit smelt like that of the imaginary demon, so that made things easier for him in the Black Wind Mountain. He could disguise himself as one of the ferocious beasts and walk freely around the mountain. You don't trust in my strength? Asked the girl as if she could read Lin Feng's thoughts. Of course, I don't. The Black Wind Mountain is extremely dangerous. Do you think that it is easy? Besides, you said that you have never left here before. Even though I have never left here, I know the Black Wind Mountain better than anyone. I even know where to go in order to avoid ferocious beasts. It is very easy for me, come and go as I please. The girl said while sounding indifferent, and also looked at Lin Feng expressionless. Better than anyone? She knew how to avoid ferocious beasts? Lin Feng was stupefied. He was looking suspiciously at that beautiful young girl. If she could really avoid fighting while navigating the mountain, then it would indeed be safer. Do you agree to help me leave? Asked Lin Feng. Yes, I have never left here, but I would like to see how it is on the outside. If I get out of the Black Wind Mountain, I will also need your help, said the young girl very honestly. Well, your mother. She went out. I still don't know when she's coming back. No need to worry about her. Lin Feng was a bit confused, but it would be very hard alone in the Black Mountain Forest with all these extremely powerful wild beasts. Lin Feng nodded and asked, then when should we leave? Now, replied the young girl. Alright, I want to go to the Yun Hai sect. Do you know it? Said Lin Feng as he stood up. I know everything in the Black Wind Mountain, but if I leave the Black Wind Mountain, I'll be lost. The young girl replied honestly, showing that she was extremely naive. End of chapter 93. Chapter 94. I will just show you. The tops of the trees were still covered with early morning fog. Some people could already be seen walking past the gate leading into the territory of the Yun Hai sect at the foot of its mountain. Most of them were going to the Yun Hai sect. Very few people were walking away from the sect. At that moment, a young man and a young woman were walking towards the Yun Hai sect. They were looking at the mountain where the Yun Hai sect was, and they both smiled. Girl, this is the Yun Hai sect. Duan Tian Lang really is an incredibly powerful man. He completely destroyed the Yun Hai sect within one day. That's why everybody admires him in the Shui Yu country. Nobody will ever dare provoke him or his family in the future. Besides, I heard that he has an enemy in Duan Ren City. His enemy has a divine arrow spirit. When he heard what happened to the Yun Hai sect, he started coughing blood. It seems like he is seriously ill. When the young man wearing luxurious clothes told the young and beautiful girl these things, they both laughed wholeheartedly. Besides, now that the Yun Hai sect has disappeared, our Qing Yi sect has expanded faster. Nobody in the surrounding area will dare to attack us. Indeed, if the big sects of the country don't come attack us, this entire area is ours. The young girl laughed and said, Every day is different. The Yunhai sect used to be extremely powerful and now it is nothing but dust. Over time everything would eventually fall. The sect became so strong that many people are now frightened of you. Core disciples could maybe compete with you, but elite disciples are worthless. Besides, you're only 17 years old and you're already so powerful. You're a genius. Your future is filled with endless opportunities. Our Qing Yi sect is much stronger now. It can't be compared with the Yunhai sect of the past. We have so many geniuses. They only had a few good skills and techniques, that's all. The Yunhai sect was a bunch of crappy cultivators. If we keep improving our stock of skills and techniques, we'll become much stronger than they ever were. When the young man wearing the luxurious clothes heard the young girl praise him, he felt extremely proud of himself and laughed arrogantly. Is that so? At that moment, a voice came from behind. The young girl and boy turned around and saw two people. But the young boy and girl didn't even look at one of them. They directly stared at the young girl wearing white robes. They were fascinated by her beauty. They had the impression that nothing else existed in the world other than her beauty. They could only see that beautiful girl wearing white robes. She made all the material attractions of that world utterly unimportant. One only wanted to look at her forever. She didn't look like any other person in the world. The boy wearing the luxurious clothes and his fellow disciple were staring at the beautiful girl and had the feeling they were looking at a spirit. In the world, there were surprisingly people who could be that beautiful. The girl who was standing next to Lin Feng, when she noticed that these people were staring at her, couldn't help but smile wryly and shake her head. The girl had done exactly as she had promised Lin Feng. They had left the Black Wind Mountain, and what surprised Lin Feng the most is that they really had encountered no ferocious beast at all. They had managed to avoid fighting altogether. Lin Feng had started to think that the Black Wind Mountain wasn't actually as terrifying as the rumors described. There were certain paths that were incredibly safe, it was just that very few people knew of these paths. Of course, the Yunhai sect is a crappy sect. Otherwise, how could they have been annihilated so easily? Said the arrogant young man. The girl who was with the young man couldn't help but dully stare at the other girl. She didn't feel at ease because that other girl was much more beautiful than her. She had a lot of self-confidence when it came to her appearance and believed that she was extremely beautiful, but at that moment, she had the feeling that she didn't exist when standing next to that other beautiful girl. That girl was infinitely more beautiful than her. Since the Yunhai sect is a crappy sect, then why are the disciples of the Qing Yi sect so afraid of going near the Yunhai sect disciples? Why do you all keep a distance of a few hundred meters from the sect even now? Why do you all look at the Yunhai sect's disciples with such reverence and respect? Lin Feng said that while smiling coldly. The Qing Yi sect was an extremely small sect. They suddenly dared criticize the Yunhai sect because it had been annihilated. It seemed like they had forgotten that they used to bow down before the Yunhai sect's disciples. They were really a bunch of shameless people. That's because there are rumors which say that the Yunhai sect has a great multitude of great skills and techniques, that's all. I am happy that they are all dead. Besides, we are proud of our sect. We've never bowed in front of Yunhai sect's disciples. They're just a bunch of trash. That young arrogant disciple suddenly regained his composure and stopped staring at the girl. His eyes suddenly looked incredibly evil. Lin Feng was accompanied by an extremely beautiful girl who looked like a goddess. How was it possible not to be jealous of him? Such a beautiful girl should be given to the patriarch of the small Qing Yi sect as a wife. Suddenly, the young arrogant disciple paused and started looking at Lin Feng with eyes filled with killing intent. Lin Feng frowned. His heart felt cold. That young man was suddenly looking at Lin Feng as if he wanted to kill him. The weak are the prey of the strong. The law of the jungle was the law of this world. If someone wanted to kill someone else, he would have no compassion and do it without hesitation. If I understand you properly, the Qing Yi sect's disciples are much stronger than those of the Yunhai sect, is that right? Asked Lin Feng coldly. Definitely. How could the trash of the Yunhai sect compare themselves with the great disciples of the Qing Yi sect? The young man becoming more and more aggressive. He wanted to make the beautiful girl accompanying Lin Feng impressed by his confidence and strength. I challenged an elite disciple of the Yunhai sect one day and I lost. You seem to be even stronger though, considering what you are saying. Shall we have a look? Lin Feng had a naive smile on the corner of his mouth, making him look harmless and weak. Elite disciples of the Yunhai sect are so crappy. They can't even be compared with me. But since you are curious, I will show you what a strong cultivator is and how weak you are in comparison. The young man wouldn't have thought that Lin Feng would take the initiative to challenge him. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. Lin Feng was going to die in such a pitiful way. Besides, what is a piece of trash like you doing with such an amazingly beautiful girl? When you die, she will stay with me and I will take care of her. While saying these words, the young man in luxurious clothes took out a long sword and waved it through the air. He released his sword spirit and started moving towards Lin Feng, looking extremely overconfident. Second Ling Chi layer, and you think you are going to kill me? That's surprising, said Lin Feng on a cold and indifferent tone. Lin Feng raised his right hand and an extremely powerful and strong sword chi suddenly emerged from his palm and invaded the atmosphere. The young man almost immediately collapsed when he was hit by the pressure. His face turned deathly pale with fright. The fact that you use a sword is a humiliation to all swords, Lin Feng said in a cold tone. The young man was already frozen by the pressure of the chi which Lin Feng released. A thin mark of blood appeared on his throat, and with his eyes looking immensely frightened, he collapsed heavily onto the ground. The girl who was accompanying him also looked terrified. How had her fellow disciple been killed? How strong, how powerful! There was a gigantic gap between Lin Feng and her fellow disciple. When the girl saw that Lin Feng was staring at her, she could not help but start shaking with fear. I don't even need to use a single skill to kill trash from the Qing Yi sect. Lin Feng's cold expression made him look evil, like a ferocious beast. Tell me your purpose for coming to the Yun Hai sect. The Yun Hai sect was completely annihilated. We came here to test our luck and see if we could find a few good skills and techniques. We are not the only ones. Many other people want to come here for the same purpose. The young man hadn't died yet and hastily replied to Lin Feng. What about those who exterminated the Yun Hai sect? Haven't they stolen everything already? Those who exterminated the Yun Hai sect stayed here for 3 days after the battle. They stole almost everything, but maybe they didn't care about some skills and techniques which might prove very useful to us. Besides, the boy who had just been defeated by Lin Feng looked ashamed. He was being humiliated. Besides what? Besides, in the stormy gorge, there are many corpses. Maybe they were carrying things which we could take note that they have died. Lin Feng was shaking in anger from head to toe. These animals wanted to violate the dead bodies of his fellow disciples and elders. An extremely strong and sharp sword chi invaded the atmosphere. The young man suddenly looked deathly pale again. That sword chi was so powerful. How strong was Lin Feng? Cripple your own cultivation and then piss off. Lin Feng sounded extremely cold-blooded. He was initially thinking of letting these people off, but when he heard that they wanted to steal things from the dead of the Yun Hai sect, he didn't feel like being merciful anymore. These 2 disciples were shaking in terror. I will let you take 3 breaths from now. If you don't cripple your own cultivation, you will not breathe a 4th. Lin Feng had said he would kill them with a commanding tone. If I cripple my own cultivation, isn't it like dying? Alright, I'll finish you off now then. Lin Feng released an extremely strong sword chi which oppressed them so much that they could feel the pressure was ready to crush them. The 2 young disciples were stunned. Alright, I'll cripple my own cultivation, said the 2 young people while gnashing their teeth. They raised their hand and stabbed their dantian. They became so weak that they could not even stand. They fell helplessly onto the ground. Meng Qing, let's go. Lin Feng said that to the girl who was accompanying him. Lin Feng had helped her find a name because she had told him she didn't have one. That was the only name that had come into Lin Feng's mind, because Meng meant dream and Qing meant lover, and any man would have dreamt of having that girl as a lover. That was the only name which Lin Feng could come up with that would match her. Of course, the girl didn't know why Lin Feng had chosen that name for her. Actually, the outside world was completely unknown to her. Why don't you kill them? Meng Qing suddenly asked Lin Feng that question, which surprised Lin Feng. He was blankly staring at her. When I look at their eyes, I feel like vomiting. Meng Qing had replied to her own question. Her face revealed that she wasn't used to speaking with other people. When you look into my eyes, what do you feel? I will just show you. Lin Feng was stupefied. Meng Qing's expression seemed like she suddenly had a great idea, and she ran forward. Meng Qing didn't really understand Lin Feng's feelings, but Lin Feng found her to be cute and charming. Unknown warmth filled his heart. Lin Feng was observing Meng Qing. He was in admiration of her beauty. She looked so delicate and so cute. There was absolutely nothing detestable about her. Her thoughts were also pure and innocent. Lin Feng found it easy to get close to her. End of chapter 94. Chapter 95. Each step brings death. Life and death arena, stormy gorge, Yun Hai sect. A bright red river of blood was flowing through the stormy gorge. Even though 7 days had passed, the river of blood was still flowing. There was a legion of corpses lying on the ground. The corpses hadn't started decomposing yet due to the cold temperature. The strangest thing was that many people were walking around the corpses and didn't look disgusted by all the blood. They did not seem disturbed by the scene before them and in the contrary looked overjoyed. Each of these people had eyes filled with greed. The Yun Hai sect deserved the title of a great sect. Even if these corpses only belonged to disciples of the sect, they still have a great deal of items on them. A male cultivator was kneeling down next to a corpse and took a high-quality yellow-level skill from it. He then looked around him carefully, as if he was scared to be noticed by someone before he picked it up. He wasn't the only one, there was a multitude of other people just like him stealing things from the corpses within the gorge. They were all disciples of the smaller sects. When they heard that the Yun Hai sect had been completely annihilated, they had rushed here to see if they would be lucky and could find some treasures hidden on the corpses. At that moment, there were 2 silhouettes stood at the top of the stormy gorge and were about to throw themselves into the gorge. One of them looked fascinatingly beautiful. The other was wearing a mask which had a bronze look. This mask had the capacity to increase qi. These 2 people were obviously Lin Feng and Meng Qing. Lin Feng was too famous. All the great sects of the country were looking to kill him. He obviously had to be careful. Therefore, he had taken that mask from inside the temple. When she saw all the blood and smelt the putrid odor released by the corpses, Meng Qing started feeling dizzy. She felt like vomiting when she saw the scene. "Why did we come here?" asked Meng Qing looking at Lin Feng, but she noticed that Lin Feng was absolutely motionless. An extremely cold aura was surrounding his body. These animals not even letting the dead rest in peace. Lin Feng saw someone who was searching a dead body and when he finished, he kicked it which made the body roll away. Lin Feng was indescribably disgusted at the actions of these cultivators. When she saw Lin Feng's change in aura, Meng Qing stopped talking. She didn't want to disturb Lin Feng. Lin Feng spread his arms looking like a bird spreading its wings and jumped down into the gorge. Down in the stormy gorge, the cultivators who were looting the dead bodies of the Yun Hai sect members could feel a bad premonition. Something was about to happen. They all started to look around and then looked at Lin Feng who was jumping down into the gorge. "Here comes somebody again." Everybody then stopped looking at Lin Feng and continued what they were doing. "Help yourself, but let's not bother each other." The cultivator who had just kicked one of the corpses away said to Lin Feng who had just landed next to him. His manner of speech was indifferent. Nobody replied. An incredibly powerful sword qi emanated from Lin Feng's body which stupefied the cultivator who had just spoke to Lin Feng. He started to shake from head to toe with fear. "What are you doing? There are many people here. Could it be that you refuse to share the items with anyone else?" When that person sensed the qi released by Lin Feng, he shouted that really loud, trying to draw the attention of everyone in the area. Obviously, when the crowd heard that somebody had arrived and wanted all the items for himself, they all turned around and stared at Lin Feng with angry expressions. But they only saw the glow from a sword. It was a bright and resplendent light, but it looked deadly. That glow appeared and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Then the cultivator who had spoken loudly was immediately beheaded by Lin Feng. Lin Feng hadn't pronounced a single word. When everybody saw that, their eyes began to fill with indignation. Because he was an extremely powerful cultivator, that guy wanted to take all the treasures here for himself? "Your Excellency, everybody has come here with the same purpose. There is no need to be cruel and merciless, otherwise, it would make a powerful man such as yourself look rude rather than your usual elegant self." A cultivator who wasn't far from Lin Feng had said with a cold tone. Lin Feng turned around. Lin Feng's eyes, hidden inside the mask, were extremely evil to behold. He didn't feel like showing mercy to anyone any longer. Lin Feng's silhouette vanished in the blink of an eye and appeared as quickly in front of the man who had just spoke to him. He then activated his deadly sword. Cruel? Merciless? Rude? This despicable cultivator was stealing various treasures from dead bodies and suddenly talked about cruelty, mercy and rudeness. Lin Feng's sword started to glow again. The other man's face turned deathly pale. He was terrified when he saw the display of such power. "Surprisingly, you are the type of person to enjoy spending time with the corpses here, so I will help you become one of them." This was the first time that Lin Feng had spoken during the whole event. His voice was filled with cold and merciless killing intent. His mask hid his face which made people even more scared of him. Lin Feng made one step and with a single strike he sent another head toppling to the ground. It was clear that Lin Feng was not playing around. However, it seemed like he was killing these fellow cultivators without any reason. What does he think he is doing? Could it be that he wants to kill everybody within the stormy gorge? When the crowd saw that another person had just died, they were all terrified. Stop. What are you? Said a cultivator who saw Lin Feng walk past him. I am the one that will take your soul. Lin Feng's sword started to glow again, and as his final word was heard, a dazzling light filled the air. The cultivators stared in shock as another headless body hit the floor. All the people who were in the gorge looting from the corpses suddenly stopped and started staring at the strange cultivator wearing the bronze mask. Each time he took a step, another cultivator's head would be separated from their body. At that moment, Lin Feng had already killed more than a dozen of the grave robbers already. They didn't even know what they had done to make Lin Feng so angry. This does not look good. We have to find a way to stop him. Otherwise, he'll end up killing us as well. Some of the cultivators had understood that the situation was getting more dangerous. When that person finished talking, those surrounding him were all nodding in agreement. Let's fight him together as a group. We shouldn't give him a single opportunity to attack. The whole crowd started moving towards Lin Feng as a group and were getting ready to attack him. His sword was too dreadful. It seemed like Lin Feng would behead anyone he encountered on his way. Lin Feng was still moving from place to place and beheading people when he noticed the crowd moving towards him. These people sensed the qi emanating from Lin Feng's body, and it was growing stronger and stronger. Don't be afraid of him. He cannot deal with this many of us. Even if he is quite strong, there is no way he can defeat this many people at once. The closer they got, the better they could sense Lin Feng's qi. Many cultivators had tried to reassure the others. Although it looked like these words were said to reassure themselves before the others. Lin Feng slowly started walking towards the approaching group. The sword qi was growing stronger and stronger, which gradually destroyed the confidence of the cultivators in the crowd. You are listening to Peerless Martial God audio on light novel Aloud. I don't want any of the treasures here. Finally, one of the cultivators who was in the middle of the crowd gave up because he could sense the strong qi which Lin Feng was emitting. He then turned around and tried to escape. He had the feeling that even this many people couldn't defeat Lin Feng. Deadly sword. Lin Feng took a few steps forward and brandished his long sword. At that moment, a deadly sword qi invaded the atmosphere and created a hurricane-like wind, annihilating everything in its way. The people in the crowd were breathing heavily. The nearer they were getting to Lin Feng, the more scared they were becoming. They had almost stopped moving and were looking at Lin Feng in terror. At this moment, every single cultivator within the group looked down at their chest and saw a small hole which had been pierced. Why? Each and every single one of them started to collapse on the ground one after the other. Even while dying, they still didn't understand what was going on. Lin Feng was extremely strong. Why was he attacking them? Because you all deserve death. Lin Feng was holding his sword and turned around and looked at the horizon. There was nobody left. The last remaining grave robbers were running away. Lin Feng had become extremely strong. A moment before, whether it had been a dozen or 100 cultivators, nobody would have been able to avoid his sword. The only solution would have been to run far away. What cruel behavior. Suddenly, on the top of the stormy gorge, a loud voice could be heard. 3 cultivators were jumping down into the gorge. Who are you? Asked the one who seemed to be the leader of the group of 3. He was a handsome young man who looked arrogant. Chen Xing was an elite disciple, but his name wasn't carved into the ranking list. He had been very scared of being killed by Duan Tian Lang. Fortunately, Wen Ren Yan had been there to protect him. After having been tested by Duan Tian Lang, he had been recognized as a talented cultivator and he had been assigned to guard the Yun Hai sect. Wen Ren Yan was extremely strong, and Duan Tian Lang attached great importance to him. Duan Tian Lang had thus sent Wen Ren Yan to the Imperial city to join the holy courtyard of Shui Yu. At that moment, Wen Ren Yan was in the Imperial city and everybody respected him. Many had started to worship him. When Wen Ren Yan left the holy courtyard of Shui Yu, he would become a very important person within the country. Chen Xing didn't dare provoke Wen Ren Yan and wanted to gain his favor. Wen Ren Yan was extremely strong. He was a genius. Since Duan Tian Lang had also started taking care of him, Wen Ren Yan's destiny could only be extraordinary. Well, Lin Feng's power is even scarier than that of Wen Ren Yan. If he had agreed to leave with Duan Tian Lang, I probably wouldn't even be alive now. When thinking about Wen Ren Yan, Chen Xing remembered Lin Feng and how scary he was. Even when Lin Feng spoke, it was terrifying. When Lin Feng saw Chen Xing, a light flashed through his eyes under the mask. His eyes looked even more ruthless and evil than before. How shameless. Chen Xing had betrayed the Yunhai sect and was acting arrogantly again. He was again treating others like they were beneath him and had obviously not learnt his lesson. How quickly he returned to his old ways. Since the holy courtyard has been created, Duan Tianlang is extremely busy and has no time to come here and take care of everything. I am here to handle things on his behalf. Everything here belongs to me. If you want to take things from these corpses, do as you please, but don't make trouble otherwise, I will kill you like a worthless dog. Chen Xing was shouting loudly at Lin Feng. His voice was resonating throughout entire gorge. He was still using the same arrogant tone he had before when he spoke to Lin Feng. His voice carried a clear killing intent. Chen Xing thought that he was stronger than anyone from the smaller sects who would come here to loot. He thought that everyone was beneath him and even dared to look down on Lin Feng. End of chapter 95. Chapter 96. A dreadful night. When Lin Feng heard what Chen Xing had said, he was even more furious. Before, he was a disciple of the Yunhai sect and was respected by everyone. These days, he despised the Yunhai sect. Because he was only interested in saving his neck, he had betrayed the Yunhai sect. So he had gone and sought refuge with Duan Tianlang, and to make things worse he let anyone violate the bodies of his former fellow disciples. Chen Xing was a beast, an animal. He did not deserve to live. Duan Tianlang is not worried about letting a piece of trash like you manage the Yunhai sect? When Chen Xing heard the evil and cold voice that came from behind the mask, he was stupefied. He stared at Lin Feng and asked, "Who are you calling a piece of trash?" Chen Xing, you used to be the best of all the ordinary disciples. However, you betrayed the Yunhai sect and allowed others to humiliate and violate the bodies of your former sect member. What gives you the right to look so proud and arrogant? Lin Feng had spoken with an ice-cold tone which made Chen Xing shrink back. He was fixedly staring at Lin Feng. Who are you? Because of the bronze mask, Lin Feng's voice sounded a little different. Lin Feng's body gestures were a bit different as well. Therefore, Chen Xing was unable to recognize Lin Feng even though he was standing before him. You betrayed the Yunhai sect and now you're trying to act like a little boss here. Do you even have a sense of shame? Lin Feng questioned him yet again. His sword started to glow while releasing a strong qi which created a whirlwind. When that qi reached Chen Xing's body, he started shaking violently. His pupils shrank and he was breathing heavily and very quickly. Lin Feng. That's Lin Feng, and he surprisingly still dares to come back to the Yunhai sect. Chen Xing was stupefied. Almost all the elders and Nan Gongling had died in the battle in order to save Lin Feng's life. Chen Xing would have never thought that Lin Feng would dare to come back. Duan Tianlang was looking for Lin Feng everywhere. If he found him, he would make him die in the most horrible conditions. But because everybody thought that Lin Feng would never dare come back to the Yunhai sect, Duan Tianlang hadn't bothered staying there. He had just asked Chen Xing and 2 other cultivators of the first Ling Qi layer to stay there and guard the territory of the Yunhai sect. These days, all the strongest cultivators had gone to the Imperial city to join the holy courtyard of Shui Yu. Duan Tianlang was excited by that major event. Lin Feng was strong enough to walk freely within the territory of the Yunhai sect. A horrifyingly strong qi crashed onto Chen Xing's body. His back was soaked with cold sweat. It seems that you want to know who I am. When Lin Feng saw Chen Xing's reaction, he laughed evilly. It seemed like he was becoming more and more evil. The 2 people standing next to Chen Xing were oppressed by Lin Feng's sword qi as well, but were not brave enough to retaliate in any way. Let me off. I do not have the power to do anything. Chen Xing was begging Lin Feng. He was terrified by the idea that he would die here after escaping the massacre. You can't do anything? But you did manage to betray the Yunhai sect. You also managed to let the smaller sects come to humiliate and disrespect the corpses of your former sect. You had the power to stop them, but you didn't. How can I tolerate such disgrace? Lin Feng took a step forward while his sword started glowing with a magnificent sword force. I don't want to. Chen Xing's weak voice spread in the atmosphere. Suddenly, Lin Feng's sword disappeared from sight and 3 different trails of blood gushed up in the air. Nobody had been able to resist to Lin Feng's sword. When Lin Feng looked at the 3 corpses, he exhaled a deep breath. All of those who had come to steal items and treasures from the corpses of the sect had left or were among the corpses. Only Lin Feng was left alive while surrounded by the endless corpses. Lin Feng looked around at all the corpses of his former sect members. He was looking at these corpses lying on the ground with eyes filled with sorrow. Some of them had had their heads split in 2, Some had been attacked multiple times in the back. As they retreated, the more Lin Feng looked, the more his determination increased. Lin Feng had decided to take the risk to come to the Yun Hai sect to see these corpses for one last time and to see the setting sun refracting on that river of blood. He never wanted to forget that the blood was flowing because of hatred, jealousy and other evil intentions. He wanted to remember that the weak were bullied and killed and that the strong ruled in the world. Lin Feng was furious, and anger welled up within his heart. Lin Feng definitely wanted to avenge all the deaths of his former sect members. He would never forget that these people had sacrificed themselves to save his life. He was bearing the weight of too many people on his shoulders. All these dead people had put endless faith in Lin Feng. At that moment, the ground started to shake. It was even shaking more and more intensely. The sound of the shaking ground was also getting louder and louder. Kai Xie armored cavalry. Lin Feng's pupils shrank. Without hesitating, he quickly moved towards the edge of the gorge. He could hear the sound of the incoming heavy cavalry. Moonlight feather agility. Lin Feng stabbed his sword into the cliff in order to propel himself to the top faster. In the space of a few deep breaths, he reached the top. Let's go quickly. When Lin Feng sensed the ground shake even more, he was stunned. These Kai Xie armored horses were so quick. It seemed like they needed only one breath to gallop over a dozen meters. Lin Feng couldn't afford to think too much. He grabbed Meng Qing's little hand and left at full speed. When she felt Lin Feng's hand holding her hand, she had a strange sensation, but considering Lin Feng was anxious and, in a hurry, she let him take her hand. Lin Feng had reacted quickly. However, there was no way to escape. At that moment, Kai Xie armored horses were arriving at full speed. Lin Feng stopped in his tracks. The cavalry on the Kai Xie armored horses were also wearing armor which looked imposing. When Lin Feng saw the Kai Xie armored horses move nearer, he held Meng Qing's little hand even tighter. She also held Lin Feng's hand tighter. But Lin Feng didn't pay attention to that, he didn't even notice it. What troubled him the most is that he hadn't expected the Kai Xie armored horses to come to the Yun Hai sect, and especially at full speed like this. Could it be that they know that I have returned? Thought Lin Feng. The Kai Xie armored horses were moving closer and closer. They hadn't stopped galloping at full speed. How handsome. When Lin Feng looked at one of the riders, he couldn't help but be amazed. It was a middle-aged man. He looked handsome and had the most dashing eyebrows. However, he looked extremely sad, like something sorrowful was haunting his heart. He was wearing a beautiful armor plate which looked quite spectacular. His gray hair was floating in the wind. He looked slightly strange though. The Kai Xie armored horses galloped past Lin Feng and surprisingly didn't even look at him. Lin Feng couldn't help but be a bit scared. Maybe he was wrong after all and they were not here for him. They possibly didn't know that he was Lin Feng. When he thought about it, Lin Feng relaxed a little. When he turned around and saw the Kai Xie armored horse neigh and then jump straight down from the top of the gorge. That looked extremely dangerous. Amazing. Lin Feng was impressed by the Kai Xie horse's power. He then turned around and went back to the edge of the gorge and looked down at the scene. At that moment, Lin Feng saw the man with the gray hair stand on the highest fighting stage of the life and death arena. He looked like a statue. He was calmly looking at all the corpses. His gray hair was still floating in the wind. He looked lonely and sad. Lin Feng was stupefied. The gray-haired man suddenly kneeled down on the fighting stage of the life and death arena, and while kneeling down, his knees had made a loud crashing sound when they slammed into the arena floor. General. A loud voice had interrupting him. The voice was spreading through the air and making the atmosphere shake. Immediately after, the other cavalry all got off their Kai Xie armored horses and stared at their general. Some of them kneeled down. He looked like he was injured, and his eyes revealed an immense sadness. Lin Feng's heart was pounding. Lin Feng found it amazing that the other cavalry seemed to care about their general so much. Lin Feng suddenly thought about a name. If the rumors were true, he really looked like that. Divine Arrow, Lu Kang Lan. Lin Feng was sure that it was Lu Kang Lan. Except for him, who would kneel down in front of the dead disciples of the Yun Hai sect. Besides, wasn't he one of the generals within the army? No wonder Protector Bei felt proud each time he mentioned Lu Kang Lan's name. Such an outstanding student definitely deserved such recognition. This is my own business. Stand up everyone. Lu Kang Lan's voice was loud and resonated in the gorge. His voice didn't sound imposing or bossy. On the contrary, it sounded friendly and clear so that everyone could hear properly. General, please take good care of yourself. When Lu Kang Lan had learnt that his army had been ordered to exterminate the Yun Hai sect, He had disregarded everything and headed to the Yun Hai sect. He had immediately put the harness on his horse and had ridden it for 3 days and 3 nights without sleep to arrive at the Yun Hai sect as soon as possible. All the other cavalry wanted to follow him on their own free will. I order you to stand up. Lu Kanglan's voice was still calm. When they heard him, the cavalry stood up. They would never disobey Lu Kanglan. When I was 7 years old, I joined the Yun Hai sect. I received a teacher and was respected, but then I left and abandoned them for the sake of the Shui Yu country. I will never forget the affection I received from other Yun Hai sect members. I will never forget my dear teacher either. But now, the Yun Hai sect has been destroyed and my army has played a big role in that massacre. I will never forgive myself for that. When Lu Kanglan finished talking, he started kowtowing in front of all the corpses and hitting his head against the ground of the fighting stage. Suddenly, a noise emerged. General, Duan Tianlang had been premeditating this event for a long time. We have all been fooled. One of the cavalry troops said that to Lu Kanglan. I know that Duan Tianlang is a monster. He even ordered Fei Fei to convince the best disciples of the Yun Hai sect to go to the holy courtyard of Shui Yu. But it is useless to try and find excuses. I have played a big role in this affair as well. I have been unfair to the Yun Hai sect and played a part in its destruction. End of chapter 96. Chapter 97. The Imperial city of Shui Yu. Lu Kanglan kept kowtowing and his head hit the ground of the fighting stage over and over again. All of the troops watching this scene felt for their general. They felt powerless and hopeless in front of their general who was suffering so much. The cavalry troops all felt very close to their general. If a soldier was attacked, even if he was low-ranked, Lu Kanglan wouldn't hesitate to protect them. Lu Kanglan didn't kneel down in front of anything or anyone. He didn't even bow in front of the emperor, but at this moment, he kowtowed more than he ever had in his entire life. The Yun Hai sect has given everything to me, but I escaped. How shameless can I be? Lu Kanglan looked desperate, which filled all the soldiers with emotion. They shouted in unison, "General!" A strong qi was released into the atmosphere and he raised his arm in preparation to cripple his own cultivation. The soldiers were staring at him and suddenly, there was no movement. Lu Kanglan was as motionless as the corpses surrounding him and there was complete silence in the gorge. Coward! A cold and indifferent voice filled the entire gorge. When everybody heard the voice, they looked stupefied. Coward? Was Lu Kanglan a coward? Since you abandoned the Yun Hai sect, you also played a role in its destruction. You must pay with your life. These words made the soldiers extremely furious. Lin Feng was the person who had said those words to Lu Kanglan. Since he had insulted Lu Kanglan, he had to die. At that moment, an incredible force and qi moved straight towards Lin Feng's body. The soldiers on the Kai Xie armored horses were releasing such a strong and powerful energy. Lin Feng felt completely oppressed and had the sensation his bones were going to explode. Only these cavalry troops were able to release such a strong qi. Lin Feng was almost collapsing under the weight of that qi, but he remained calm as before, looking at Lu Kanglan on the fighting stage of the life and death arena. You are already a walking corpse. Duan Tianlang achieved his aim long ago. No need to try and escape again. He just used you and doesn't need you anymore. All the soldiers were furious, but Lu Kanglan raised his head and looked up at the top of the gorge. You are ready to die, and your daughter, Lu Fei, can now become a member of the Duan family. You don't need to worry about her. Lin Feng's words were like a sharp sword that cut into Lu Kanglan. Lu Kanglan was stunned. Was his daughter Lu Fei going to marry Duan Han? When you die, maybe all those that have died for the Yun Hai sect will be able to rest in peace because they will know that they have died for nothing. There was no hope for you. Each and every single word that Lin Feng said was like a sharp sword. Lu Kanglan closed his eyes and slowly put his hand down. That's right. Lu Kanglan had abandoned everything and everyone. Could it be that Lu Fei was really going to become one of the Duans though? What was to be done if she married Duan Han? They had exterminated the Yun Hai sect, so who was left to protect Lu Fei? When they saw that Lu Kanglan had put his hand down, the soldiers didn't feel angry at Lin Feng anymore. They were grateful because they understood that Lin Feng had been using these harsh words to stimulate Lu Kanglan to prevent him from crippling his own cultivation or even ending his own life. Good that Lin Feng was here, otherwise Lu Kanglan would have probably killed himself here. But Lin Feng's words had been really harsh. Each time, they had resonated in Lu Kanglan's heart and only increased his sorrow. Take care of your general. The Yun Hai sect doesn't hate or blame him. Protector Bei was always worried about him. The wife of the former patriarch also respected and admired him. She also forgave him for everything that happened in the past. Make sure that he remembers this. Lin Feng had stopped looking at Lu Kanglan and had walked towards the cavalry seated on the Kai Xie armored horses, and while still holding Meng Qing's hand, he said these words to the soldiers. A while after Lin Feng left, Lu Kanglan opened his eyes and a sharp and determined light flashed through them, which made his army delighted. Their general was back. Everybody help me bury my fellow sect members. Let's allow the dead to rest in peace. This is an order. Lu Kanglan's voice was calm but still firm. From today onwards, you have to guard the territory of the Yun Hai sect. Without my permission, don't let anybody into its territory. If they try to enter by force, kill them without mercy. Lu Kanglan was strict with his commands. When he finished talking, everybody shouted in unison, "At your command." Lu Kanglan looked expressionless. He climbed back up onto the top of the gorge and gazed into the distance as if he was looking for Lin Feng. General. At that moment, a soldier walked towards Lu Kanglan and stopped in front of him. What is it? Asked Lu Kanglan. General, that young man earlier told me to tell you that the Yun Hai sect doesn't blame or hate you. Protector Bei was worried about you every day, and that the wife of the former patriarch forgave you for everything. She also admired and respected you at the end. Lu Kanglan was standing while speechless and motionless. He raised his hand and looked at the sky. That powerful and battle-hardened man had tears flowing from his eyes. Forgive this unworthy disciple. After a while, Lu Kanglan took a deep breath and stopped crying. He could see a silhouette on the horizon. Lin Feng. Lu Kanglan had never seen Lin Feng, but Lu Fei had told him a lot about him. He wanted to know what kind of young man had inspired so many people in the Yun Hai sect, and also why he had just saved him from ending his own life. At that moment, Lu Kanglan gradually started to understand that Lin Feng was probably not an ordinary person. If Lin Feng was an ordinary person, then could he have used such words when talking to Lu Kanglan? If Lin Feng was an ordinary 16-year-old teenager, could he have resisted the chi of the cavalry on the Kai Xie armored horses without collapsing? If Lin Feng was an ordinary teenager, he wouldn't have come back to the Yun Hai sect, rather, he would have left and never come back. After all, Duan Tianlang and many others wanted to kill him. Lin Feng didn't leave the Yun Hai sect even though Protector Bei had told him to go to Duan Ren City to look for Lu Kanglan. He was never planning to leave the corpses of his sect to be defiled. He would stay and protect them so that the dead could rest easy. However, now that he had seen Lu Kanglan arrive with his troops, he had decided to leave because Lu Kanglan's army would be more capable of protecting the Yun Hai sect territory than him. They were all extremely powerful and there were such a large number of them. Lin Feng knew that the Imperial clan was the strongest within the Shui Yu country. But in the continent of the Nine Clouds, there were people who were even stronger than the Emperor. There were people in the continent that could destroy the entire Shui Yu country if they wished to. Lin Feng wanted to reach such heights. At that moment, Lin Feng and Meng Qing were standing on a huge rock. Lin Feng saw Lu Kanglan's silhouette descending the mountain at full speed. Let's go. They jumped from the big rock and took a small road. They started moving farther away from the approaching Lu Kanglan. Aren't there many questions that you would like to ask me? Lin Feng asked Meng Qing in a low voice. If you don't tell me, I will not ask, replied Meng Qing in an indifferent tone. It seemed like her heart had never been moved before. Lin Feng wanted to know if she ever smiled or laughed. My mother says that when a man is sad, the best is to let him keep his thoughts to himself and not to ask anything. Lin Feng wasn't expecting her to continue speaking. She was staring at Lin Feng. It seemed like she wanted to verify her mother's statement and check its authenticity. Everything that you know of the outside world is what your mother has told you? Indeed, said Meng Qing while nodding. What else has your mother told you about men? Asked Lin Feng. Lin Feng had the feeling that he knew nothing about the world even though he had memories from two different worlds, and Meng Qing, she only memories of the Black Wind Mountain. My mother also said that none of these things are good, replied Meng Qing. Lin Feng was surprised. He looked at Meng Qing, his eyes filled with curiosity. It seemed like Meng Qing was about to tell him some private things. Could it be that her mother had decided to live in seclusion in the hinterland of the Black Wind Mountain because she had been emotionally hurt in the past? She told me how horrible and disgusting men were, but you seem to be a really good man. What my mother told me doesn't apply to you. Her beautiful face looked so cute as if she didn't understand what she was talking about. She was definitely very curious to discover the world, which is why she secretly escaped with Lin Feng. Lin Feng could not help but let out a laugh. It really felt good to laugh after everything that happened. Are there other things? What else did your mother tell you? She told me a lot of things, said Meng Qing while nodding. She then looked at Lin Feng and said, but I'm not telling you these things. The Imperial City, the Shui country both were extremely vast. Billions of people were living in the Imperial City, but it never looked overcrowded. The Imperial City had huge roads. Several hundreds of people could walk side by side on some of its large roads. In the Imperial City, there were mostly pedestrians. Even those who had horses often didn't ride them in the city but led them by hand. In the Imperial City, there were multiple incredibly strong cultivators who had become rich. They could gather many items by killing extremely strong ferocious beasts and had slowly gathered a fortune. Many of them had extremely expensive horses. A few days later, it would be the inauguration of the holy courtyard of Shui. All the strongest disciples of the biggest sects of the country would be there. The holy courtyard of Shui was greedy and was always longing for more geniuses. Many young cultivators, from the age of 6 to the age of 18, were hoping to be able to join the holy courtyard of Shui. In such conditions, they probably would be able to become a great cultivator in the future. The holy courtyard of Shui was going to be the best cultivation academy in the history of the country. At that moment, some silhouettes were walking on the main road. They attracted everybody's attention. Amongst the group of people, there was a girl who was wearing red robe. She looked very beautiful. An ice and fire chi was emerging endlessly from her body. These people all want to become members of the holy courtyard of Shui, but what they don't know is that it is extremely hard to join it. Only geniuses can gain entry. How many people have what is required to join? A teenager said in a low voice. It made the girl in the red robes smile coldly. That girl wearing red robes was Lin Qian. I heard that Lin Feng has returned to the Imperial City too. I heard that the holy courtyard of Shui is really interested in her. I don't know if it's true or not. Lin Hong, who was standing next to Lin Qian, said this, which had stupefied Lin Qian. The last time they had seen they hadn't been able to battle properly to find out which of them was stronger. Lin Qian remembered the annual tournament in Yangzhou City. She couldn't help but recall that piece of trash that had been expelled from the Lin clan. He had surprised everybody at the annual tournament. He had even scared everyone with the power he held. He was truly a terrifying genius. But in Yangzhou City, a myriad of people still didn't even know Lin Feng's name. She remembered how Lin Feng had been able to leave Yangzhou City by simply taking Lin Feng as a hostage in front of everybody. Now that the Yunhai sect doesn't exist anymore, he is probably dead. Lin Qian didn't know if that was a good thing though. She did not understand why she had mixed feeling after hearing of his death. End of chapter 97. Chapter 98. Duan Feng. Yunyang was a small town quite far from the Yunhai sect. It only had about a few thousand inhabitants. It was said that in that small town, there was a noble in decline whose family name was Duan. He apparently belonged to the Imperial clan but had been expelled because of internal conflicts. After having been expelled, he moved to his small town. Of course, the people that lived in the small town did not believe the rumors. How could a member of the Duan clan end up in such a small town? That noble had a large courtyard in front of his house in the small town, in front of which there were 2 huge carriages. It looked like they were getting ready to go on a long journey. Sister, let's go. A young boy, who was about 14, said to a gorgeous girl who was stood in front of him. That gorgeous girl looked as if she was going to cry. She was gazing at the horizon. She was staring in the direction of the Yunhai sect and her eyes had revealed a great sorrow. She would have never thought that when she left the Yunhai sect, it would get annihilated. Everybody had died, everybody. Alright. When the girl heard the boy, she tried to smile and slightly nodded. She then said, I'm getting into the carriage now, let's leave. Sister, don't worry. Wait until we arrive in the Imperial City. Our brother will introduce you to some handsome and talented boys. The girl shook her head and nearly laughed at the idea. Everybody is waiting, we should make our way. Okay, said the young boy while nodding and walked over to the gate. Jing Yun, you and the young master should take this carriage, said a young guard hastily while looking at Jing Yun. He was thinking that Jing Yun was growing more beautiful. He wished she could become his wife, but knew that he could only dream. Indeed, Jing Yun, you need to have a rest. Old Wang and I are outside, said another young man while smiling. Sister, they are right. Let's sit, said the young master whose family name was Duan while pushing Jing Yun inside the carriage. Even though Jing Yun had been a servant in their family since she was a child, the young master was like a sibling to her. Jing Yun didn't refuse and went into the spacious carriage. At the same time, Lin Feng and Meng Qing arrived in Yunyang. I hope that we'll find a horse or a carriage which we can use, said Lin Feng. He felt desperate since it would be unlikely for him to find a horse or carriage for sale in such a small town. He couldn't help but force a wry smile. His goal was to go to the Imperial city, which was a great distance from that small town. Traveling there by foot wasn't a realistic option. Lin Feng had completely neglected that aspect when leaving the Yun Hai sect. He did not plan ahead and instead started to travel towards the capital on foot. Is that a carriage over there? Meng Qing was pointing to a place in the horizon and asked Lin Feng with her usual indifferent tone. Lin Feng raised his hand and looked to where she was pointing. He saw a few carriages coming towards them. What a coincidence. Lin Feng smiled and started walking towards the carriages. When they saw the youth approaching the carriages were brought to a stop. Who are you? Let us pass, shouted a young man furiously at Lin Feng, who was blocking the way. My friend, you are only using one carriage and you still have others. Could we borrow one of them? I would happily give you a huge sum of money in exchange. Lin Feng was smiling at the young man and remained very polite. Inside the carriage, Jing Yun anxiously opened the curtains when she heard the familiar voice. When she saw Lin Feng, she couldn't but feel overjoyed. I'm sorry, we will need them later, we cannot let you use them, replied old Wang while pulling on the reins. Exactly. Get out of our way this instant. We don't need your money, shouted a young man wearing black robes, which surprised Lin Feng a little. There was no need to get that angry over something like this. After all, Lin Feng had remained polite. It wasn't a problem if they couldn't give him a positive answer, but they had no need to be rude. Lin Feng. A voice came from inside the carriage. Jing Yun rushed out of her carriage to speak with Lin Feng. She had a big warm smile on her face. He hadn't died. The Yun Hai sect had been annihilated, but Lin Feng had surprisingly survived. Jing Yun. Lin Feng was stupefied when he saw Jing Yun. She looked as resplendent and beautiful as she did before. She looked as fresh as a spring breeze. Jing Yun, who is that? At that moment, the young man in black robes moved down from his horse and stood in front of Lin Feng. He then arrogantly looked at Lin Feng. Lin Feng, you're really alive. What happened to the Yun Hai sect? Said Jing Yun as if she couldn't believe her eyes. She quickly moved next to Lin Feng, which made the young boy in black robes grow terribly angry. His expression became extremely cold. Lin Feng was looking at her in a very strange way and then said, Jing Yun, you really don't know? I really don't know. When the second round of the elite disciple exam took place, I had to leave because the young master wanted me to come back and go to the Imperial city. I had to accompany him as it is my duty. I thought that I would go back to the sect a few days later, but Jing Yun was unable to keep speaking. She had been worried to death at the event. It was like a nightmare for her. I see. Lin Feng was happy that Jing Yun hadn't been there on that day, otherwise. Jing Yun, who is that? At that moment, the coach driver, old Wang, asked Jing Yun again. Uncle Wang, this is my friend, Lin Feng. He is also a disciple of the Yun Hai sect. Jing Yun pulled Lin Feng and introduced him to Uncle Wang. I see, replied Uncle Wang while slightly nodding his head. The Yun Hai sect has been destroyed. How can he still be alive? Said the arrogant young man in black when he noticed how enthusiastic Jing Yun and Lin Feng were. Jing Yun was surprised at his response. Wan Qing Shan, what's the problem? Jing Yun said with an ice-cold tone. She was actually angry that he was acting this way. You should know what I mean, continued Wan Qing Shan angrily while staring at Lin Feng. Jing Yun was just an ordinary disciple of the Yun Hai sect. Since Lin Feng was Jing Yun's acquaintance, he was probably an ordinary disciple as well. He had probably reached the 8th or 9th Qi layer. Of course, Wan Qing Shan wasn't going to pay attention to someone as weak as Lin Feng. Besides, the Yun Hai sect had been destroyed, so Lin Feng was probably drifting and living without purpose like a beggar. Lin Feng shook his head and decided to ignore Wan Qing Shan. Jing Yun, are you going to the Imperial city? Yes, said Jing Yun while nodding her head. Very good. I am heading there as well. Can you lend me a carriage? We can travel together. Really? Let me ask the young master. There should be no problem with you joining us. When Jing Yun heard that Lin Feng was going to the Imperial city as well, she felt delighted. Jing Yun, it doesn't look too good. Uncle Wang said that to Jing Yun on a cold and detached tone. Uncle Wang, Lin Feng is also a disciple of the Yun Hai sect. He is quite strong. He can also help the guards. Exactly, I could help the guards. Nodded Lin Feng. The Yunhai sect has been exterminated, and even if he's strong, we don't need more guards. Said Wan Qing-shan coldly. Jing Yun, you know what our purpose is. It's not very convenient to have him with us, but letting him accompany us on a part of the journey is no problem. Said Uncle Wang after considering the situation. The other carriages were ready to use anyway. Besides, if there was a problem, Lin Feng could indeed be useful. He eventually accepted Lin Feng into to escort party. Uncle Wang, it's all right, let him come with me. At that moment, the young master came out of the carriage and said while smiling at Lin Feng, my name is Duan Feng. Lin Feng, replied Lin Feng while slightly nodding his head and smiling. His name was similar to Lin Feng's, but it had a different meaning. Young master, said Uncle Wang while looking at Duan Feng, who wanted to say something, but Duan Feng interrupted him and said, Uncle Wang, I am with Jing Yun in the carriage, there will be no problem. Of course, our new fellow Lin Feng can sit with us so that we can all speak together. Young master, how can you accept such a thing? Asked Wan Qing-shan, surprised to see that Duan Feng allowed Lin Feng to sit with them. At that moment, he didn't seem very happy. The other guard also pulled a long face. Young master, your status, how can you sit with such people? Said the other young man, who also didn't agree. What's the relation between my status and... never mind. Stop talking now. If I say he can, then he can, is that clear? Said Duan Feng strictly and then added, Lin Feng, big brother, please come into the carriage. Wait, I still have a friend. Lin Feng turned around and saw that Meng Qing was still standing behind. He then called her loudly, Meng Qing. When she heard him, Meng Qing slowly came to Lin Feng and then stayed behind him. When these guards saw the extraordinarily beautiful Meng Qing, they were stupefied. They found her absolutely gorgeous. They thought that her beauty was infinite. What a beautiful young girl. A moment before, nobody had paid attention to Meng Qing. The old man Wang was also astonished. Jing Yun was also a beautiful girl, but next to Meng Qing, she was obviously invisible. Meng Qing could make most men lose their soul to her beauty. She was infinitely beautiful. At that moment, Jing Yun noticed Meng Qing. When she saw Meng Qing standing behind Lin Feng, she couldn't help but pull a long face. That girl is very beautiful. Lin Feng, big brother, since she is your friend, she can obviously join us. Duan Feng was a very warm and enthusiastic person. Indeed, Lin Feng, let's sit down inside the carriage. Said Jing Yun while smiling and nodding. Let's go inside. Said Lin Feng to Meng Qing. Then, they immediately went into the carriage. Wan Qing-shan was extremely jealous when he saw that beautiful girl. That little boy, I have to show him, a disciple of the Yunhai sect, is that a joke? Wan Qing-shan envied Lin Feng, who was sitting inside the carriage with two amazingly beautiful girls. End of chapter 98. Chapter 99. The Celestial Academy. The three Qian Li Shui horses were galloping at full speed down the large road. Inside the carriage, Duan Feng and Jing Yun were sitting next to each, while Lin Feng and Meng Qing were sitting next to each. Both pairs were sat face to face. Lin Feng, how did Meng Qing and you get to know each other? Jing Yun was staring at Meng Qing, but Meng Qing remained expressionless since the beginning. It seemed like the muscles on her face hadn't moved at all. The fact that she was expressionless, though, actually made her even more beautiful. Her beauty was truly breathtaking. Jing Yun didn't ask Lin Feng how he had survived the massacre of the Yunhai sect because she was scared to touch on Lin Feng's fresh wound. It was obvious that he was still greatly wounded in his heart. It was strange though. Lin Feng had survived and all the others had died. Of course, Jing Yun wasn't going to blame Lin Feng for that. On the contrary, she was very happy that Lin Feng had survived. The fact that he was alive was the most important thing to her right now. We met in the mountains. Lin Feng vaguely replied to Jing Yun because Meng Qing might not have appreciated if Lin Feng shared her past with others. Oh, well, why are you heading to the Imperial City then? Asked Jing Yun. The Imperial City was full of extremely strong cultivators. It was the place which held the best cultivators of the Shui Yu country. There was also a great deal of them looking for Lin Feng. Because there are a great many people in the Imperial City, replied Lin Feng, but Jing Yun didn't hear him. And you, Jing Yun? Why are you going to the Imperial City? Asked Lin Feng while looking at Jing Yun and Duan Feng. From what Jing Yun had told Lin Feng before, it seemed that Duan Feng had asked for her to accompany him to the Imperial City and that he was going there because he had people to meet. Duan Feng had to leave immediately and travel all the way from his small town without stop, which meant the people he had to meet were most likely not ordinary people. Jing Yun glanced at Duan Feng, who was sitting next to her. Duan Feng was laughing and said, "Lin Feng, big brother, Jing Yun is accompanying me to the Imperial city because my big brother wants me to go there to practice cultivation at a cultivation academy." "Academy?" said Lin Feng, looking perplexed, and then asked, "The holy courtyard of Shui Yu?" "No," said Duan Feng while shaking his head, "the Celestial Academy." "The Celestial Academy?" Lin Feng was surprised. He had never heard of the Celestial Academy. "Indeed, the Celestial Academy," Duan Feng said while nodding, and then added, "The Celestial Academy is not very famous. Not many people know about it. Actually, it doesn't accept external applicants. Someone who is already there has to recommend you, which is why my big brother recommended me." "Recommend? Not external applicants?" Lin Feng was surprised. Were academies like sects but with a slight difference? In a sect, like the Yunhai sect, there was a countless number of disciples. They were then separated into different classes: ordinary, elite, and core disciples. Then, there were the ordinary and the elite elders. The hierarchy was extremely strict, and disciples had to rely almost exclusively on their own abilities to climb up in the hierarchy and to receive consideration from the sect. Academies were something new in the Shui Yu country. They only accepted young people who were extremely talented. They had cultivation teachers and received the best weapons and other resources. Teachers helped the juniors to become strong cultivators. Before, in the Shui Yu country, there were no academies. It was a concept which had come from another land. Therefore, there were very few academies in the country, and they were not famous at all. They couldn't be compared with the foundation of the large sects. The establishment of the holy courtyard of Shui Yu enabled some of the most outstanding and talented young cultivators to receive instruction. The holy courtyard of Shui Yu was being established to counterbalance the importance of sects and less popular academies within the country. "Lin Feng, brother, you are a Yunhai sect disciple. You're probably just as strong as Jing Yun. When the right moment comes, I'll talk to my big brother and see if there's a way for you to join the Celestial Academy." Duan Feng was smiling sincerely. Even though he was still very young, he was already very mature. Besides, he had a strong personality considering the way he had talked to these arrogant guards. "Oh yes, Lin Feng, you should come to the Celestial Academy." Jing Yun's expression started to brighten. The Yunhai sect had been annihilated, so if Lin Feng joined the Celestial Academy, then it wouldn't be treason against the sect. Besides, Jing Yun didn't even ask herself if Lin Feng was strong enough. During the first round of the elite disciple exam, Jing Yun had seen with her own eyes how strong Lin Feng was. He had killed an elite disciple with a single strike from his sword and had then become an elite disciple. Lin Feng was laughing but didn't reply. Even though the Yunhai sect had been annihilated, Lin Feng was the new patriarch of the Yunhai sect. The carriage was already far away from the small town. The evening sun was shining down on the earth. Inside of the carriage, Lin Feng, Duan Feng and Jing Yun were unceasingly chatting while Meng Qing was quiet and had closed her eyes. She looked like she had fallen asleep. She looked extremely peaceful and serene as she rocked back and forth with the carriage. Lin Feng took off his top and wrapped it around Meng Qing's shoulder. The temperature was quite low and Meng Qing had put on such light-weight robes. At that moment, Jing Yun made a weird face. A short while after, Meng Qing opened her eyes, looked around her and noticed Lin Feng's top wrapped around her shoulder. She looked very surprised. She had never experienced such a thing before, so she found it quite strange. Vroom vroom vroom, the carriage suddenly started shaking. At that moment, Uncle Wang pulled on the reins and stopped the carriage. The ground was still shaking. It was getting more and more intense. "Uncle Wang, what's wrong?" asked Duan Feng from inside. "Young master, there are thieves. Don't come out. I will negotiate with them," said Uncle Wang strictly. Uncle Wang then went towards the thieves to negotiate with them. A short moment after, a horrible shriek was heard which scared those inside the carriage. "Send me someone who knows how to talk," shouted an extremely aggressive voice. "I'm going to see," said Duan Feng hastily. He then immediately went out of the carriage, followed closely by Lin Feng and Jing Yun. Meng Qing didn't follow them and stayed inside the carriage. Not far from the carriage there were a few dozens of thieves who didn't look very friendly. "I'm going to see," said one of the guards as he walked towards the thieves. These thieves were riding horses. One of them, who was holding a dagger in his hand, jumped off his horse and threw himself at the young guard. The young man was extremely surprised, He suddenly grabbed his spear and thrust it towards the dagger. But at that moment, the thief had already reached the young guard and slit his throat with the dagger. Blood was gushing from the young guard's throat as he fell lifelessly onto the ground. Jing Wuhen was stupefied. Because of all the blood, which was so close to her, she was overcome with nausea. Her face turned deathly pale. I said, "Send me someone who knows how to speak. That girl doesn't seem too bad." The thief was pointing at Jing Wuhen with his dagger. At that moment, all the other thieves laughed evilly. "Indeed, yes. We want to talk to that pretty girl," said the thieves in unison while thinking of other obscene things. When Jing Wuhen heard what these thieves were saying, her face looked even more livid. "Jing Wuhen, get into the carriage," said Lin Feng to Jing Wuhen while pushing her towards the carriage. "Little boy, you surprisingly dare hide the girl, you want to die." Every single thief was looking at Lin Feng furiously. "Indeed, we have to kill that guy and take the girl to make us happy." "What the hell are you doing?" Wan Qingshan was furiously shouting at Lin Feng. He was furious. Lin Feng was stupefied and coldly looking at Wan Qingshan. What was he doing? It sounded like Wan Qingshan wanted him to hand over Jing Wuhen to the thieves. "You little piece of trash. You're causing trouble. Now, this is your problem, and if you want to escape, don't count on us to rescue you. We won't help you." Wang Qingshan was expressionless. He was curious to see what kind of disciples the Yunhai sect had. "I don't need your kind of help," replied Lin Feng coldly before running towards the thieves. "I'll talk to you guys for a while." Lin Feng was standing close to the leader of the bandits as he spoke with a cold tone. "You want to die?" A thief with a long dagger jumped towards Lin Feng while stabbing with his dagger, which emitted a whistling sound as it pierced through the air. Suddenly there was a dazzling light which filled the air. Lin Feng had unsheathed his soft sword. No one had seen his movement and he slowly began to sheath his sword. Suddenly blood splashed everywhere from the thief's throat. The thief was dead. Lin Feng's speed had greatly increased, and his speed alone proved that Lin Feng was an extremely powerful cultivator. Therefore, he could carry out attacks very quickly. His sword skills were extremely high, and he would often kill people with a single strike from his sword. How was this possible? How had that thief been killed with a single movement? He was no good. "Give me someone else to talk to, alright?" said Lin Feng indifferently towards the thieves. Lin Feng had noticed how young some of them were. It seemed like only one sword strike had been enough to scare the majority of them. Wan Qingshan was stupefied. He wasn't happy because Lin Feng had killed a thief, on the contrary, he was unpleasantly surprised to see that Lin Feng was so strong. They were unable to guess what Lin Feng's cultivation level was as he had only used a single quick strike. They only knew that he could use his sword extremely quickly to deal lethal strikes. "My friend, this thing has nothing to do with you. You don't need to get involved," said the leader of the thieves in a low voice to Lin Feng, which showed how terrified he was. Lin Feng was stupefied. Lin Feng was suspicious though and said, "Didn't you want to kill me a moment ago? I'm waiting for you. Since you are being like this, then don't blame us for being impolite." The leader of the thieves looked at all the other thieves and said, "Kill him." 3 thieves headed towards Lin Feng at full speed. Lin Feng was surrounded by the attacks from 3 different people. Die. A thief had thrust his long dagger, which was diffusing an extremely strong qi towards Lin Feng's body. It was the same sensation as in the stormy gorge when he faced the soldier's qi. However, the difference between their strengths was like heaven and earth. Die. Another voice filled the air. A long dagger was spinning in the air, which looked incredibly dangerous. All the thieves on their horses were simultaneously moving towards Lin Feng to kill him. Lin Feng suddenly jumped up in the air. While it looked like he was seemingly floating in the air, he adopted a strange position. At that moment, he was at the same height as the thieves sitting on their horses. Deadly sword. Lin Feng's sword was glowing and releasing a dazzling light into the atmosphere. It released an incredible amount of deadly qi which created a vortex in the air. In the blink of an eye, the thieves were surrounded by an incredible amount of qi. Lin Feng's deadly sword qi suddenly had the shape of a magnificent arc as it slashed through the air. The horses were going insane and neighing. All the thieves were falling down lifelessly from the back of their horses one after the other. With a single sword strike, all of them had been killed. End of chapter 99. Chapter 100. Traitor or not? A strong smell of blood invaded the atmosphere. Everybody was calmly staring at the horses that were running around with nobody on their back. The leader of the thieves was looking at all these horses without anyone riding them with complete shock. He then looked at all the corpses that were spread across the floor and could not believe it. Only one sword strike and they had all died. That powerful attack was a masterpiece that killed everyone who stood in Lin Feng's path. Ling Qi Lair. Wan Qingshan and the other young guard were stupefied. Lin Feng was way too strong. Provoking him was a mistake. No wonder that Jing Yun was particularly friendly to him. He was an extraordinary young man with amazing strength. Wan Qingshan's back was covered with a cold sweat. He was provoking Lin Feng earlier. If Lin Feng had attacked him the same way as he attacked these few thieves, he would probably be. Uncle Wang, still sitting at the front of the carriage, was stunned. He was blankly staring at Lin Feng's back. "Friend, aren't your methods a bit cruel?" said the leader of the thieves, looking furious. "When you kill people and rob them on the roadside, do you care about the fact that you might be cruel?" Lin Feng's tone was ice cold. Thieves were the kind of people who never felt bad when they killed other people but became furious if one of them was killed. They thought that killing was like a game, but they didn't like losing. Lin Feng started walking forwards. A strong energy enveloped the leader of the thieves, which made him shiver from head to toe. "Friend, take one more step and you'll die," said the chief of the thieves, threatening Lin Feng. "One more step? But there are still more steps between us," said Lin Feng while running towards him, releasing an incredible amount of sword qi. The leader of the thieves did not expect him to not even hesitate and started to grind his teeth in anger. He took out his long dagger and suddenly the strong and violent qi invaded the atmosphere. "He is also at the Ling Qi lair," thought Wan Qingshan, who was stupefied. A thief had surprisingly reached the Ling Qi lair. But none of them would be able to defeat Lin Feng anyway. Lin Feng groaned. It seemed like Thief's long dagger was shaking in fear because of the energy of Lin Feng's sword. Lin Feng's sword was moving towards the thief at full speed. Even though it wasn't diffusing any light, his sword contained an incredible amount of energy. There was no light because Lin Feng was condensing the energy of his deadly sword skill back into his sword. A whistling sound spread in the atmosphere. Lin Feng's sword was moving towards the thief's throat at full speed. His long dagger hadn't blocked the attack at all. Lin Feng was getting more and more familiar with his sword each day. He was becoming more and more agile as well as quicker and quicker. The thief heavily fell on the ground with a look of shock covering his face. Even a cultivator of the Ling Qi lair can't stop Lin Feng. How incredibly strong! Everybody was astonished by Lin Feng's strength. He was way too strong. Lin Feng had killed that thief, who had broken through to the Ling Qi lair with a single stroke of his sword. It had looked like it had taken no effort from him. Lin Feng didn't even look at the corpses, he just turned around and walked back towards his group. "Lin Feng, big brother, you are very strong." Duan Feng was smiling at Lin Feng with admiration. It is perfectly understandable why Lin Feng was in one of the largest sects. We wouldn't ever be able to achieve such a thing. He is so strong. Wan Qingshan was walking towards Lin Feng while flattering him. If someone was only slightly stronger than him, he would envy them and bully them with his status, but if somebody was much stronger than him, he was either scared or filled with admiration. Someone who survived the extermination of a great sect has to be strong, replied Lin Feng with a detached tone. He looked a little disdainful as well. Lin Feng had never considered himself as merciful. When Wan Qingshan still thought that he was weak, he didn't hesitate and humiliate Lin Feng. It is not out of mercy that Lin Feng hadn't attacked him, but because Jing Yun, Duan Feng and the others were there. After all, he was the guest. Now that he had shown that he was strong, Wan Qingshan wanted to make friends with him, but Lin Feng didn't feel like it. When Wan Qingshan heard Lin Feng's cold tone of speech, he became angry again but kept it to himself this time. Provoking Lin Feng again would be a reckless act. Lin Feng was able to easily kill cultivators of the Ling Qi lair. Provoking him would be too dangerous. If he made Lin Feng angry, Wan Qingshan might not take another breath. Wan Qingshan moved away in a bad mood. "Lin Feng, let's go," said Duan Feng, ready to get back into the carriage. "Young master." At that moment, Uncle Wang was in front of the carriage and called Duan Feng, which surprised him. Duan Feng asked, "Uncle Wang, what's wrong?" "Young master, it is not appropriate to travel with Lin Feng. Give him a carriage for him and his friend," said Uncle Wang, which surprised everybody. He suddenly wanted to get rid of Lin Feng? But having a cultivator of the Ling Qi lair with them was perfect protection from most bandits and thieves. It would make their journey much safer. After all, the greatest threat they would meet on the road would be Ling Qi lair thieves and bandits. Lin Feng's eyes were wide open in shock. He didn't understand what the old man meant. "Uncle Wang, what's wrong? Lin Feng and I making friends. It is a stroke of luck as well as a pleasure to be able to travel with Lin Feng. Replied Duan Feng, who didn't understand. Young master, don't be naive. There are dangerous things. There are things which you cannot understand because you are too young. Uncle Wang was shaking his head and sighing. Lin Feng, let's do it this way. You can have one of these carriages, you can even have both of them if you feel like it. This is a present to thank you for saving us. What do you think? Said Uncle Wang while looking at Lin Feng. Lin Feng frowned and asked Uncle Wang, what are you implying? Dangerous things? What was he talking about? Young Lin Feng asks many questions but understands what I mean deep in his heart. Said Uncle Wang while shaking his head. I understand nothing of what you're saying. Give me a hint. Young man, since you are insisting, I will tell you. Don't blame me. Uncle Wang paused and then continued while staring at Lin Feng. Young man, these thieves were not weak. If they had attacked us, they would have easily defeated us, but they were looking for someone to talk. Maybe it would have worked, but you immediately killed them. You would want to talk to these thieves. Lin Feng was puzzled. This is only my opinion, but it is wrong that Lin Feng killed all of these thieves without trying even a single time to negotiate with them. Added Uncle Wang aggressively. Not even trying to negotiate? That time, Lin Feng understood what Uncle Wang meant. He could help but smile coldly and say to Uncle Wang, what you are trying to say is that I am just like these thieves, that I kill for pleasure? And maybe that I'm a thief too? A moment ago, the leader of these thieves was calmly talking to Lin Feng, but we didn't hear what he was saying. Uncle Wang didn't immediately reply to Lin Feng and carefully replied. Lin Feng was stunned. He dared to say that the leader of the thieves had talked calmly. Well, are there other things you would like to blame me for? Said Lin Feng while smiling coldly. Exactly. Lin Feng is right. Uncle Wang, you're way too heartless. Treating Lin Feng as if he hadn't tricked himself to help us. Thanks be to him. We are still alive and still have all of our things. How can you criticize Lin Feng like that? Duan Feng said while coming down of the carriage. Young master, you are only a child. You cannot distinguish good and bad. Said Uncle Wang while shaking his head and sighing. Young master, if I am talking to you like this, it is because I want you to understand who you are and how people will attempt to use your status. You are going to the Imperial city, which in some ways is your heritage. You are not just anybody. Of course, I know, replied Duan Feng while nodding. Since it is like that, young master, I want to ask you, does your family have anything to do with Duan Tianlang? Duan Feng was surprised. Why would Uncle Wang suddenly talk about Duan Tianlang? What did he have to do with that whole story? I know that he is also part of my Duan clan. I also know that our relations are not harmonious. Replied Duan Feng. Young master, since you know that, think again. Isn't it Duan Tianlang who annihilated the Yun Hai sect? Then shortly after, Lin Feng arrives in our small town of Yunyang when he suddenly comes across us. Wasn't it too much to be a coincidence? Lin Feng was speechless when he heard Uncle Wang's words. Uncle Wang thought that Duan Tianlang had made Lin Feng betray his sect and then sent him to the small town to find Duan Feng. Uncle Wang, you think too much. Lin Feng could have already easily killed us. Alright, but young master, remember that your big brother asked you to come to the Imperial city and then, suddenly Lin Feng appears from nowhere and then kills an army of thieves to save us. Doesn't he want us to return the favor in some way? That's enough. Said Lin Feng coldly to Uncle Wang, who kept talking over and over again. Uncle Wang's goal was obvious. He wanted Lin Feng to leave. He could talk as much nonsense as he wished. All of his words served one single purpose. Lin Feng looked inside the carriage and said to Meng Qing, Meng Qing, we are leaving. Alright, replied Meng Qing while nodding and coming out of the carriage. Lin Feng, let me convince Uncle Wang, said Jing Yun hastily. Lin Feng, you and Meng Qing get back into the carriage. I trust you, begged Duan Feng. No need. I would be humiliating myself, said Lin Feng while glancing at Uncle Wang. He then looked at Duan Feng and Jing Yun and said, let's meet in the Imperial city. When Lin Feng finished talking, he pulled Meng Qing's sleeve and started leaving. Lin Feng, maybe that it is only a coincidence and I have misunderstood you. What I said a moment ago is still valid. You can choose any of these carriages, as you please, said Uncle Wang. No need. Thank you. Lin Feng refused the old man's proposition. Lin Feng wasn't shameless. He wasn't going to use the carriages of people who had just humiliated him and suggested that he might be a traitor to his sect. He had just killed all these thieves. Weren't there enough horses to use? Can you ride a horse? Asked Lin Feng to Meng Qing. No, I can't, said Meng Qing while shaking her head. But do you want to teach me how to ride? Asked Meng Qing to Lin Feng. Me? Teach you how to ride a horse? Said Lin Feng surprised. You want me to teach you how to ride a horse? Meng Qing was staring blankly at Lin Feng, which made Lin Feng smile. Anything Meng Qing would ask, Lin Feng would agree. At that moment, he said, "All right." When Lin Feng finished talking, another surprising thing happened. End of chapter 100. Hope you guys enjoy the chapters, and a thumbs up is appreciated.